Leadership is not easy. I never ever want to paint a picture that leadership is easy. Leadership is hard. Leadership is also a privilege, because if you have the opportunity to influence, if you have an opportunity where people will listen to you, then you owe it to those team members, or you owe it to whoever you're speaking to make sure that you are showing up with authenticity, with transparency, with empathy, but also sticking to the point. Welcome to CEO Conversations, the private practice podcast. I'm your host, Brandy Mabra. It's time to show up as a confident leader to create a practice and life you love. Hello. Welcome back to another episode of CEO Conversations, the private practice podcast. It is Brandy Mabra here. I'm super excited because today we're going to be talking about leadership and what does it take for you to be a steadfast leader. So this was a topic actually that came up in our latest retreat, and it's something that as I think about on my leadership career and how I even show up as a leader inside of my own business, the steadfast part sometimes can be a little wavering. So we're going to talk about what it takes to be a steadfast leader. What does it mean to be a steadfast leader? What does that look like? What's the impact when you actually show up that way? And what can be on the receiving end when your team is led this way? It's very powerful, so I cannot wait to dive into it. So let's go ahead and get started. So when I remember working late nights and early mornings and weekends and really just being tired and exhausted and missing like the key moments of my family's life. There are times where I think about, man, I wish I could get those days and months and weeks back. However, everything happens for a reason, and I would not be able to give you this lesson today. So when I think about steadfast leadership, it is a leadership that is proactive. It's leadership that is clear. It's leadership where you're communicating effectively. Steadfast leadership is not about perfection. It's actually about the opposite. And it is something that a lot of leaders, especially being an entrepreneur with all the things that can happen, don't necessarily do so well. So during the retreat, these are goals that our clients have where I want to show up as a steadfast leader. And so I want to give you some of the things that we're doing by working with them, some of the things that we're implementing, some of the things that I'm even implementing for myself in order for you to be a steadfast leader. Because when you do that, let me tell you what happens. I know from experience, you will make more money, you will have more time back on your calendar, you will feel more freedom inside of your practice, and things will not feel so hard and things will not feel so chaotic. When you think about the steadfast leaders, there's three things that happen with this. Number one is they have the discernment for what they are going after. So this is all about clarity of vision. They understand where the ship is headed, and they're able to communicate that. They also have the discipline to see the plan through. Oftentimes in entrepreneurship, and it's very easy to do, it's like, oh, I had a plan, but then we aborted the plan. Or I said this one thing that I wanted my team to do, but then I forgot to check on it. And then we didn't create a plan, but we didn't create the plan, but we didn't follow the plan. And then I said that we are going to have this KPI, but we really didn't do a KPI that made sense. And then the KPI we didn't achieve the KPI, but then I forgot to check on the KPI. And then it's like just all this stuff, right? Or you go and you hear this new wonderful strategy. So I heard on this podcast or I saw on this website, or I talked to my colleague, and people are doing this. So we're going to go do that too. So then you go to the team meeting and you tell the team, this is what we're going to do. And then it doesn't work. Nope, we're going to abort that. And so this is like what happens every single day in practices all the time. And I am sometimes guilty of this, where I'll say we're going to do one thing and then I'll change it, or this is the KPI and then I'll change it. And sometimes you're coming from a place of the revenue didn't make sense this month. I'm struggling to make payroll. I don't know if I'm going to be able to pay the bills that are coming in, or the cash flow isn't making sense. And so a lot of this comes down to how proactive are you in your business? Like, how well are you setting yourself up for success? And so when we think about steadfast, the first thing that comes to my mind is actually an elephant. So I went to Thailand back in February, and I loved. We went to this elephant sanctuary, and it was just really amazing. We got to walk with the elephants on like their little daily walk, and they were not paying us any attention. They did not care because they had their own plan of things. If they were hungry, they would stop, they would eat. They would make sure that they were nourished. If they wanted water, then they were going to get water. It did not matter what we tried to get them to do. If we just had a walk, we were on their agenda. And so what I love about the elephant is they're steady. They stay the course. They do not pivot. They only pivot in order to make sure that they are taking care of themselves. And I think of steadfast leadership, that's really what it is. Like a lot of times I will say, and I've told my clients this, we had a retreat actually in Miami, and I bought everyone elephants. It was because I wanted them to have a reminder to be steadfast in their leadership, to stay the course, to make sure that they were stopping, to take breaks, to feed themselves, to drink water. Because a lot of times people want to move faster, and you can move faster, but you still have to have that strategy. You still have to move with intention, right? And so you have to stay the course. And so when we think about these three things, the first thing being the discernment, the second thing being the discipline, is the discipline to stick to the plan. And sometimes that's very hard and that's very challenging depending on what's happening. The third thing is the determination. You have to have the determination to get to where you want to go. So if there's a certain KPI that you're trying to achieve, be determined to hit it. If there's a certain level of business growth that you're trying to get to, be determined to get there, right? And so when you actually show up with these three things in mind, discernment, discipline, and determination, you're going to be able to get to where you want to go. You're going to be able to pick up if you do actually need to change course because you're using data to make decisions, not just going on the latest emotion, not just going from what you feel or I woke up this morning and it's raining outside, so that means I need to do this. Like there's a lot of things that can happen. And I think it's most important right now where the economy is, you have to definitely make sure that you're setting yourself up for success and going deeper. So proactive leadership, what does that mean in today's economy? Well, there's a lot that's happening. Let's read through the lines. So as of November 1st, for some specialties, there is no longer any kind of virtual medicine. Virtual medicine. Do you know how many healthcare businesses have been made on digital medicine where you can have care done from your car? You can not even step foot into an office. And so right now, the only payer right now that's impacted is Medicare. But when we think about the steadfast leader is reading the trend of, okay, Medicare has stopped with virtual visits. There's no telehealth right now that they're paying for, and everybody is having to go back into the office in order to actually see a provider. So let's think about how is that going to impact me in the rest of my practice and the services that we provide. Well, a steadfast leader is going to dig a little bit deeper and is going to recognize if one payer's doing it, the possibility that another payer will do it, the possibility that they're going to bring this little tactic over into my specialty, and you're going to think about your office. What's happening, and I'm going to tell you now, because let me just go ahead and speed you up. Because Medicare is doing it, because it's in one type of specialty, and really it's more in the medical world, I'm going to tell you that if you are in a different specialty, you need to pay attention to it too. Because what one payer does, the rest will follow. So I know that maybe you're listening to this and there was a quote unquote air quotes of a glitch when it comes to telehealth with Blue Cross Blue Shield. That is not a glitch. I have worked for a global healthcare company that I will not say at this time. And I know whenever there's glitches that happen, it is because they're messing around in that part of the system. Why are they messing around in that part of the system? Is because they are tweaking that system And sometimes they will full-blown test things. You will be a beta person to see if we turn this on, what will happen. Well, a lot of telehealth claims were not paid. And I'm going to tell you, my theory is that is not by design. That is not by accident. It is because this is what's getting ready to happen. So if you are not thinking in a deeper way when it comes to your practice and you think like, oh, that's impacting them, it's not impacting us, or that's impacting this payer, it's not impacting us, you're going to be scrambling. And when you're scrambling, that's not steadfast leadership. So you have to take the time to sit down and pay attention to what is actually happening, not just in my specialty. We talked about in another episode, getting out of your bubble and not just paying attention to one thing, but paying attention to healthcare. And when you do that and you give yourself the actual thinking time, then you'll be able to be proactive. You'll be able to read trends. You'll be able to follow everything, like follow the tape through, where you can actually look at, if this were to happen to me and to our practice, what would happen? So for those of you who are still doing telehealth, what would happen if you got an email today saying that this telehealth service is no longer a thing, effective December 1st? What would that do to your payroll? What would that do to your reimbursement? What would that do to your practice? And are you prepared for that? So people have to prepare in times of plenty for the times where things are going to be lean. And healthcare, like I've been saying, I keep saying it, is going to change. And it is not just one specialty. So there's things being thrown around like value-based billing, especially for some specialties where value-based billing, I'm not new to this. Value-based billing has been a thing for like 20 years. However, because of economy and because of premiums and because of one big beautiful bill, and even at the time of this recording, the government is shut down. Like these are real times that you have to be prepared for. And this is not a doom and gloom type of podcast. What I'm trying to get you to understand is that you have to be in a place where you can actually create the solution to the problem. When I think about the clients inside a private practice CEO, I'm not worried. These are things that we are strategizing for. We are being proactive. We are making sure that they're set up for success. So that way, when things do happen, then they're good. I'm paying attention to trends. If they're not paying attention, I'm paying attention. And I'm trying to make sure that they are thinking deeper when it comes to their practice. And because at this point in time, I work with multiple specialties, that's actually to my favor, right? Because I know with what's happening in one type of specialty, then I'm automatically seeing the tape through and I can see what's going to happen in the next specialty. So I don't put myself in an echo chamber. I've never put myself in an echo chamber. I have a lot of specialties who come to me, but I also have a lot of heavy, I have a lot of mental health private practice owners who work with me, but also I do work with other types of specialties, whether if it's privately or if it's inside a private practice CEO, and even the information that I'm reading. And that's to my advantage, but you need to do the same thing. Don't just say like, okay, I'm a therapist, so I'm only going to pay attention to mental health. Don't just say I'm an OBGYN, so I'm only going to pay attention to what's happening in the OBGYN world. Don't say I'm a nurse practitioner and I do family medicine, so I'm only going to pay attention to what's happening in my world of things. Don't be an audiologist and say I'm only going to pay attention to what's in audiology. Don't be in physical therapy and think that I'm only going to pay attention to what's happening in physical therapy. Don't be a speech therapist and think that I'm only going to pay attention to what's happening in speech therapy. You guys get what I'm saying. Don't be a dentist. I'm just trying to think of everyone who is possibly listening to this. Like, please don't do that. Think about everything. Right? Because what's happening in one specialty is going to impact another, one way, shape, or form. So you have to really pay attention to the landscape. You have to pay attention to healthcare. You have to pay attention to industry. So that way you can show up steadfast. And when you meet with your team, and for those of you who have leadership teams, you can say, this is what's happening and this is how we're going to get through it. And if you can't show up with that type of leadership, then you already know I'm here to help you. But at the end of the day, like, this is what you have to do. This is the requirement. This is 110% the requirement. So if you were like, well, Brandy, that sounds good, but the world is burning down. The world is coming down. I had a client show up and I had to ask her, I was like, what are you reading? Like, what are you absorbing? And so you have to pay attention to, first of all, I'm telling you, no industry, pay attention to industry. But it goes back to when I said, because I said at the beginning of the year, where we're at today, this is where we are going to be. I said it. And so one of the things that I talked to is where you need to be a consumer. So read up, be educated, but do not be consumed. So when you think about being the calmness that your practice needs, because if you are freaking out and you take that to the team, then your team is going to freak out. So I know from all of my years of experience, I have always had to be the rock. As a leader, you have to be a rock. This is why it's important for you to have your own community where you can freak out with them. But when it comes to your team, you can say, we've hit a rough spot. Be authentic. You don't have to be like, oh, everything's fine. They won't believe that. But you can say, here's what's happening. So gather your facts, right? So number one, if you were in a place where you were like, oh my gosh, I don't even know what I'm going to do. Gather your facts because it's the data that you need. There's so many emotions when it comes to mindset. So if your mindset is where you're freaking out, then what is the data really telling you? This is why when you know your numbers, when you have KPIs, when you know where you're at compared to goal, when you are actually forecasting, when you have structure inside of your practice, this is where you can actually sit down and say, okay, well, what's the facts? Like, what is the true data? And then from that data, what are the decisions that I need to make as a CEO? What are the decisions that I need to make as a leader? That's number one. Number two is for you to develop what that action plan is going to be. So for example, telehealth is no longer a thing because this is real time. I'm helping my client through this. Telehealth is no longer a thing. So what does that mean? What are we going to do? Well, that means everyone has to transition back to the practice. Is that an option for you? Do you have a brick and mortar? I know for some folks who are listening to this, you don't have a brick and mortar. So if telehealth is no longer a thing for you, what are you going to do? Right? So the action plan would be, well, I need a place. Like I need to go and I need to rent a place, right? Or I need to find a place. So that could potentially be the action plan. So when you meet with your team, there's talk of telehealth no longer being a thing. Whatever date. So because of that, in order to make sure that we are prepared, I am going to be looking over the next 30 days at brick and mortar locations. So that way we can start to do whatever service in person. And that would be part of your action plan. But if you are talking about like, oh my gosh, telehealth is no longer a thing and I don't know what to do and I don't, then they're going to freak out too. Oh no, telehealth is no longer a thing. I'm not going to be able to get paid. And what are we going to do? Compared to like, oh yeah, telehealth is no longer a thing. But my leader, my strong CEO is going to make sure that we have a place. And now you're talking to your team about, can you do in person? Can you come in person? And then you're able to make a decision with that. So there's just so many things that are happening. Now is I don't want to say that it's not it's fine. It's totally fine. I don't want to be that person where I'm just sweeping it underneath the rug, but I will say now is a really big time of opportunity. So for the folks who are actually looking at this time as like, where can I come from a place of opportunity, are the people who are going to be okay. And for the folks who are actually looking at how can I be the answer to the call, which goes into number 2, why you need to action plan, then those are the folks that are going to be okay. Number 3 is for you to actually have the due dates of the plan or to map out the plan. So like in number 2, like you'll come up with like your overarching action plan. And then in 3, meeting with your team, you can come up with some additional action steps that maybe you need to take, that they need to take in order to make sure that you're okay. So when we think about the steadfast leader, the steadfast leader is a consumer. They are paying attention, but they are also equipped with data. They're equipped with what the practice needs are. They're equipped with bringing in their team and partnering with their team. They're equipped with being okay with not having all the answers. And that is truly, when we think about leadership, that's real leadership. I've had to lead through a lot of different seasons of chaos. I date back, I'm an OG of the original recession of 2008, right? I went through times where we couldn't give raises. I went through times where we were out of network. And so one of the things that you also have to prepare for is when we think about insurance companies, things are getting ready to get real tight, real tight. And what does that mean? That means that your life is about to get super complicated if you're taking insurance. And what does that mean, Brandy? That means that documentation needs to be on point, because there is companies right now, as we speak, who are getting audited because they want to make sure, hey, we've given you money. We might need our money back because the economy is hard. So what does that mean? Prior authorizations are going to get more. Codes are going to get unbundled. So all of a sudden, the amount of money that you were getting paid for one code, it's going to go down. So if you're not paying attention, your denials are about to go up. So if you're not tracking your denials, if you don't know your denial rate, which if I had to guess, a lot of people don't pay attention to denial rates, then that is going to mess you up. If you are not following all the way through, all of a sudden clawbacks are getting ready to increase, all of this is going to happen. So it's for you to really be able to understand billing. So I know right now our payroll is able to be paid because our billing is doing well. But at the end of the day, because of everything that's happening with the insurance company, prior authorizations are going to go up. Eligibility is probably going to start to change for some clients and patients. I'll get to that in a second. And so the action plan would be, I'm going to sit down with my biller and making sure that my biller is prepared for what could potentially happen and what is our action plan. And then thinking about number 3, what would be all those action steps that you come up with in order to make sure that the billing actually stays on point. So it's, like I said, there's a lot of opportunity for refinement. There's a lot of opportunity to make sure you're more streamlined in how you're showing up in your practice and for your leadership. So if you're struggling, there was a really great podcast by Emma Greed. I love her. And she was saying that the growth of your practice is only as fast as the strength of your leadership skill set. So if you are not a strong leader, if you are just stuck in the day-to-day and that's where you're leading from, then your practice's growth, it's going to feel it. It's definitely going to feel it. So another thing, the one more thing I want to talk to you about this, because I want to make sure that everybody understands, is that just because you might be private pay, you're safe from nothing. And I hate to be that way. But at the end of the day, when we think about the Steadfast leader, if you are taking all cash insurance, then your job is to pay attention to who is paying cash inside of your practice. Who are they? Is there anything that's happening with economy or industry that could impact them? Right? So for example, if you are like all of our clientele are doctors, and doctors, for the most part are paid well, and they work for a hospital system. Well, this hospital system is getting ready to go through a layoff potentially. So if you have a lot of doctors, just throwing an example out here, if you have a lot of doctors who work for a hospital system, they're inside of your practice and they pay you cash, well, you need to pay attention. If this hospital system goes through layoffs, they don't have a job, are they going to be able to pay you? Right? So I think a lot of it is just understanding fully what your practice is up against and how are you going to plan for this. And it's not just about the discounted rates, right? And so, it's really interesting at this point. Some of the things that I'm doing is, in order to make sure our clients are set up, is I'm now traveling to meet with them and their leadership teams. And so there was a particular service a great service, great service, a service line that one of our clients was creating, but the pricing, because it's, again, trying to meet the need of the economy, but the pricing was off. And the pricing was off based on who could pay for this particular service line. And we had to rework it to where now she can go to a different type of person who can actually afford it. And it was us going through the whole mindset of, why do you want to price it this way? She had her own mindset that she was thinking of, scarcity mindset, own blind spots because of what was coming up for her when she was thinking about marketing it. And we ended up having to rework it. But we followed all the way through like the business or the behavior. Sorry. We followed it through the buying behavior of this particular person and this particular type of patient that she thought that the service line would be perfect for. What I loved is because she's thinking outside the box. The economy right now requires you to think outside the box. The blind spot was coming up because the person who she thought that it would actually be for was actually going to hurt her practice, and it was going to cause her to make less money compared to help her to make more money. Steadfast leaders, imagine if she had went ahead, did all this work. Hey, here's the service line that we're going to go ahead and roll it out. And now on the other side of that, she's not making the money that she needs to make. It's not going to help. It's going to cause more harm than good, and now she's got to work herself out of that. So I think just to bring this in and just to really talk more about my experience, I remember where we were having to go through layoffs. And that was probably one of the hardest times of leadership because you are literally taking somebody's livelihood and putting them in a place of uncertainty. So as a leader, having to gather myself, and it's one of the questions that I always get, like when you let a version of this would be, when you let someone go and now you have the rest of your team, how do you explain this to the rest of the team without the rest of the team freaking out? So when we think about the steadfast leader, what I had to do is I had to ground myself first and create my own calm. I had to get very clear on my message. I practiced the message. I created a script for myself for exactly what I was going to say. I worked with HR actually on what exactly I needed to say. And I practiced the routine, so that way when I got into that room, I anticipated any questions that were going to come my way. I knew my team. I knew their strengths. I knew their weaknesses. I knew exactly how they needed to be communicated with. I knew exactly what was going to come up in that meeting before I even went into that meeting because I made it my job to know what was going to come up in that meeting. So when we think about true leadership is not easy. I never, ever want to paint a picture that leadership is easy. Leadership is hard. Leadership is also a privilege because if you have the opportunity to influence, if you have an opportunity where people will listen to you, then you owe it to those team members or you owe it to whoever you're speaking to make sure that you are showing up with authenticity, with transparency, with empathy, but also sticking to the point. So, and especially when it comes to hard messages. And so the grounding piece, the practicing piece, the intentional piece of making sure when I showed up and I communicated this hard message, you have to be steadfast. If I was all over the place, well, people are going to lose their jobs, and well, I don't really have a plan, and well, I'm going to get back to you, and well, I didn't ask that question, and well, let me talk to HR, and well, I don't know. That would have been all over the place, right? People would have been freaking out, crying, and in tears. But when I communicated, I gave them the facts. I told them what the plan was going to be. At that point in time, we had to do an interview process because we wanted to make sure we kept, honestly, the best team members. And for where the practice was going, what was going to be the best fit for what the practice needed in its next stage of version of itself. And by the end of it, I answered every question, but I also anticipated a lot of the questions. So there was only maybe one or two questions at the end, and I walked away, from that. We also made sure that our team had resources because that's a heavy weight to bear. We also made sure that we didn't drag it out, and so I think a lot of times when people are faced with hard situations, you just draw it out, like you procrastinate. And sometimes the best thing that you can do is just get over it, just get on with it. Not even get over it. But a lot of times what you can do is just get on with it. I think that this also happens when people are ready to fire somebody. Like I know inside of Private Practice CEO, we actually help a lot of our clients fire people. That sounds bad, but that's the truth. And because at the end of the day, you need a high performing team. Well, if your team currently is not high performing, what are we going to do? We got to replace people. And so with those conversations, sometimes it's like, they just draw it out. This person has been underperforming for years, sometimes for months. We've talked about them 15 different times. Cut them off, just get to it. Have the conversation, be steadfast in your leadership, make the decision, let the rest of your team know what the action plans are, use the data, and move on with your life. And so sometimes that's really what steadfast leadership is. It's where you have to make a decisive choice and then understand what's on the other side of it and be proactive about what's on the other side of it. So if you are in a place where you are like, Brandy, I am not a steadfast leader. I need some enhancement when it comes to my leadership skill sets, where my team is mimicking my non-steadfastness, if that's a word. The Own Your CEO Status Masterclass is an amazing opportunity for you to come get a really great mindset shift when it comes to leadership, making sure that you're set up for what 2026 is going to bring, with some additional opportunities of economy, different opportunities when it comes to healthcare. And we'll be able to talk about all of it inside of that masterclass. So if this is interested of you, the best way for you to join at this point in time is you can go to the show notes, sign up for CEO Moves, the newsletter, and you'll be notified of when the next CEO Masterclass is. You'll be notified when the next Own Your CEO Status Masterclass is. That is a mouthful, but it's going to be juicy. It's going to be so juicy. So if this is, again, resonating with you, then go ahead and see the show notes and sign up today. So thank you so much for listening, and I will see you guys in the next episode. Bye. Thanks for listening today. I hope you enjoyed the episode and it empowers you as the CEO of your practice. If you enjoyed the podcast, please make sure you subscribe, share the message, and leave a review. If you want more information and support in growing and scaling your practice, click the link in the show notes to take advantage of our free resources or apply to work with me directly. Thanks again, and I'll see you next time.